to arrange some of these recording sessions for us to help us with some basics on recording different aspects of what we're doing right now. And these sessions will be recorded and shared again in case it's going a little too quick for you or you have other questions you want to review. And Isaac, I know, is always available for follow-up and individual help if needed. And just a note, I have to have another meeting at 12:30, so I'm going to have to drop off early, but I'm sure you guys can all manage without me. And I'll just go ahead and turn it over to Isaac.
All right, thanks. Okay, so today, a little bit like last time, we'll be doing a brief sort of introduction to some software. The software is called ShotCut. It's video editing software. The introduction basically will follow the basic steps for virtual ensemble arrangement. I'll cover a little bit about some tips for basically preparing video, sort of some best practices for preparing video for virtual ensemble arrangement, and then we'll talk about exporting and sharing, and just again, more or less just best practices and trying to get you up to speed. There's tons and tons of resources for this software online due to the fact that it's open source, which means it's free as in freedom, not free as in free beer. You can do whatever you want with it. It's very deep software, which is why we'll really only scratch the surface today. And fortunately, you don't need to do a whole lot in video editing software to do virtual ensembles anyways. So yeah, let me just start sharing my screen here and we can start talking about how to get the software. So the website is shotcut.org. I'll put it in the chat just in case anybody needs it. Shotcut.org. And as we go, feel free to put questions in the chat or anything like that. And I'll stop occasionally to ask. So the website's pretty straightforward as far as getting the software. You'll click this to download. Yeah, so Glenn asked if it's free. Yeah, it's free as in freedom. Free as opposed to free as in free beer, which is an open source phrase, which is to say that it's free to download and do with as you please at any cost or at any point, basically at any use level. So in theory, somebody could make a Hollywood movie with it if they wanted to, and you can use it to make something as simple as a YouTube video. And it's so it's very, very, very free. It's free to tweak and free to alter as well, and use parts of in other software. So, and it's also cross-platform. So it doesn't matter if you're on a Windows, Mac, or Linux PC. And actually, the software is originally designed for Linux, which is part of the reason that the UI is a bit maybe esoteric compared to some other software that you might be used to. So that being said, you'll click download and then it'll take you here and it'll automatically try to guess what you need. And then the installer files will be down here. And then you'll install it just like any other software. Just hit download and then go ahead and install, drag that into your applications, whatever it leads you to do. Like I said, this is also a website that has a lot of tutorials and reference material. If you're ever looking for more information to get deeper into this, to do more than just what we covered today, there's tons and tons on the website, as well as even official training. So assuming you get it installed and everything without too much hassle, should be pretty straightforward. At that point, you'll just want to open up the software wherever you want it, putting it most likely in applications on Mac, could be anywhere on Windows, could be anywhere on Linux. And you'll be presented with this. Let me hide my meeting views here, or my meeting controls. So what's nice about this software is everything that you might use is sort of visible right now. There isn't a whole lot that's hidden behind too many menus. So just to sort of orient you around this screen, first of all, if you ever, sorry, the interface is changeable. So you'll see X's and these types of symbols that means to like expand the window to full screen. There's these gray dots along the edges of a lot of these things. So if you're ever wanting to adjust some things, you can always drag those. You can add tabs at the bottom here to flip through different things. And right when you open it, some of those things will be hidden in tabs as well because of the way the interface works. And at the top, you'll see a lot of the things that are already open. So for example, this tab filters, playlist, jobs, recent, project, source, all this type of thing, or the timeline. If you ever lose any of those things, all of the buttons for them are up here to turn them off or on. So for example, if I have this window that's titled filters open, and I click X, and I don't know where it is because it's a pretty crucial part, I can click filters and it'll reopen for me. And then I can always move those things around if I want to. I can also rearrange any way that I want by clicking and dragging them like a window and stacking them. So that all being said, the first thing to do is to create a new project, and that's what it's going to force you to do right away. So right in the middle, you see these two blue windows. The one on the left is for your project information, and then one on the right is if you're looking to open a recent project. This top projects folder you can usually leave as default, but basically this is just where you want to store any projects that you make. So if you want to move that around, if you want to put it in a specific place like an external hard drive or anything like that, you'll just click that and tell it where you want it to save stuff. The second one is project name. We'll call it ShotCut MacPhail. Just have a name. And then video mode will by default be set to automatic, which means that when you bring video in, it will base the video settings and the resolution settings to the video that you bring in. So if I set this to, well, here, I'll just give a brief overview. Essentially, the higher this P number is, the higher the resolution, the higher the quality. In general, phone cameras, which a lot of people are going to be using for the virtual ensemble stuff, are going to shoot at either 720p or 1080p. To be honest, with virtual ensemble stuff, you probably don't want to work at 2160p, that's 4K, but you can work at 4K if you really want to. But in general, you're going to be looking at 1080, something like that. That's 1080 is basically what, like if you're ever watching TV, in general anyways, or like a lot of YouTube videos, that type of stuff, 1080p is kind of the standard. The FPS side of things, if you want to go to a high FPS number, you can, but in general, people use 30 FPS for things like YouTube videos or this type of stuff. If you want a more kind of filmic look, if you're going for something that looks a bit more like a film, like a Hollywood film or anything like that, you could look at 24 FPS. A lot of phones can shoot in 24 FPS now, if that's something you're interested in for any reason. But in general, 1080p and 30 FPS is going to be what you're looking at. So I'm going to stop here really quickly to mention some limitations of the software. So this isn't a digital audio workstation, which is to say that because we're dealing with music, you are going to potentially run into situations where you're going to want your audio to sound better than it does and to have more control over your audio than you can at times when it comes to virtual ensemble stuff. There are audio adjustment tools in this, and you can do some of those things, but they're mostly for tweaking. So, if there's something that's really standing out to you that you are like, I need to adjust that, and you know how those things work, then you can adjust some of those basics here. However, when it comes to virtual ensembles, it and really making something that's maybe what you're used to seeing online by a professional, a lot of times they will take the audio from the video files that you collect from your ensemble, put those in a digital audio workstation, and work on those as a separate thing, and then bring those in to the video software to then layer with the virtual ensemble video. So that's mostly just an FYI. You can totally do a virtual ensemble from start to finish in this software, and you can get good sound, and it will look good and sound good. But to really push it to where you might see, let's say, like the Eric Whitaker virtual choirs, that requires a combination of tools, a combination of expertise. Again, the combination is digital audio workstation, audio production, mixing and mastering, and video production, and video editing, and video processing. So some tips, and just an FYI right now, for next week, I know these are a bit backwards basically, but for next week, I'll go into more detail on some of these things. So there will be also a video if people can't make it that will be recorded for that. I will talk about more of these things, or these details as far as getting virtual ensembles prepared. And if anybody is really needing something now, I have resources. If you'd like, I can send those to you. Just send me an email that other people have made that are handy for kind of moving along. That being said, the main thing that you need to make sure is that everybody is synced up some way prior to you beginning work on the editing portion. That's the main pro tip, basically, is however you choose to do that, they need to be synced up somehow. And so the general consensus is you can either have people play to a click, which is to say some type of metronome, or a version of the song that you'd like to create a virtual ensemble for, that everybody shares. So you could use a professional recording to play along with, as long as everybody uses the exact same one, for example. You could create your own with digital audio workstation software or even video software to send to everybody so that they can listen while playing and while recording themselves. You could create a click or a metronome track instead of playing with a metronome app or an actual physical metronome. That would require you to do something like use a voice recorder on your phone or something like that and read along or listen along to your favorite version of the track and do something like clap, especially if you have time changes or tempo changes, clapping along and creating your own click track this way, sort of like a conducting track or something like that, an audio conductor. Thinking about it that way and making sure everybody has that type of thing. Those are all great ways to make sure people are synced up. because once you have that final video file, you're going to be sort of stuck with that. And if there are issues that you wind up running into down the line, they're going to require re-recording, right? So that all said, those are some tips. And again, I'll go over those next week again. And so there will be a specific video about a lot of that stuff coming. So back to ShotCut. Once you have all your video files and once you're ready to go, you can make your project. So this middle section now has changed from that menu to a preview screen, and you'll see that as we get into it. This bottom section is the timeline where we'll put our videos. This right-hand side is a recent file list, which only shows stuff that you've recently used. It's a bit like a recent project list. So if you're looking for something you used in a previous project or something you've already used once before, that will show up here for convenient access. But we want to get new files. Adjust this for myself. And in order to do that, again, everything in ShotCut is fortunately just on screen. So at the top left, you have open file. You can always drag files in from your desktop. You can always go to the file menu, anything that feels comfortable to you. I'm just going to click the button. So now my video files are on my desktop. So I'm just going to go find those. You can open multiple files at a time if you want by clicking and dragging or highlighting any way you're used to. I'm going to open both. So what happens here now, you'll see that the files are added to my recent file list. You might notice that on the right-hand side here. And on the left-hand side, they're now added to the playlist, which was up when we first opened the software by default. While I'm thinking about it, there is a function in here that's a meter. I think that might be open by default. To be honest, I'm not really sure because I've opened this software a few times. But if it's not, opening the peak meter would be really useful considering you're working with music. The reason for that is this will show you whether or not you're going to be distorting your audio or causing issues by making it too loud before exporting it. Again, this is a feature that if you use a digital audio workstation, you can control things like volume and loudness before coming into ShotCut. But if you're not going that route and you're trying to do as much as you can in here, this could be really useful to have open so that you don't overload your signal and cause loudness issues by adjusting volume and stuff like that. So back to the playlist. If I want to find another file, I can do that just by opening file again, and it'll just continue to be added to the playlist. The playlist is a project-specific list. So if I go to another project, the playlist will be different. It'll just contain files that I import to there. When I import these files, they don't create a new copy or anything. It's just a reference to the file on the desktop. So as you can see in the middle now, that's a preview. And I can double click any of these to see them. And at the bottom, they have play controls and some other controls for being able to reference it, get an idea of what you're working with. Clip volume, all that kind of stuff. So also another FYI, these are not virtual ensemble clips. These are YouTube clips. Syncing up the video and that process of getting used to it is just takes some time. And so I don't have stuff here that's necessarily designed to be synced up, as in they're not playing the same pieces. However, the process is pretty intuitive, but it just takes some time. And the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it in terms of syncing stuff up. And again, if your music is synced up and you have a score or anything like that, or some kind of reference point that you know, syncing up will be even easier. And there's just some basic ways to get started doing that. So let's talk about the timeline. The timeline is at the bottom of the screen. I can adjust the size of it with this gray dot handle. So like I said, those are on any window, any element on the screen can be adjusted with those handles. So there's one for the timeline, and I can bring that up pretty high. If I need more space, I could delete some of these. If I really just only want to see that, I can adjust the UI. The timeline is just a way of seeing your video files over time. So if I want to bring one in, I can drag something from the playlist and drop it down here. However, something funny about ShotCut is that once you drag in the first one, it's going to assume every time you drag in the next one that you wanted to add it to the track that you made for the first one that you dragged in. Therefore, I think that it's best to just create video tracks. So there's two ways to do that. These three lines here, open a drop-down window for the timeline. And another way is to right-click your timeline. I'm going to click the three lines, and then I'm going to go add a track. I can add an audio or a video track. An audio track would be really useful if you chose to separate your audio from your video and create a mixed file. But we're just going to use the video track. I have two videos that I know I'm going to bring in, so I'm going to create two video tracks. By default, they're titled V2, V1, etc., and I can rename those if I want, but I'm not going to. There's a mute button here and a button to make it so I can't see the video that's in it. If I want to adjust, again, this isn't a digital audio workstation, but if I wanted to adjust the volume of the clip that I'm bringing in, I can do that here in the preview. So I'm just going to drag one of these in, kind of doesn't matter. And now that it's in, you can see, I can, some of the scrolling functions are a little awkward in this. I can start scrolling around and seeing it. I can click around to preview, and then I can start tweaking the file however I want. This white line is called the playhead. A lot of the functions that you do in digital audio workstations, as well as video editing software, is centered around the playhead. And in particular, the main tool that you'll use to put together your virtual ensemble and to layer them up. In order to cut video, which is that main function, all you have to do is put your playhead someplace, wherever you like, wherever you feel like you need to trim. and you can use this button, which is split at playhead. So when I do that, you can see now I have two separate sections of my file. And if I want now, I can grab that, move it around, separate it, not use it, something like that. So this left-hand side was just the introduction to the video that I took off of YouTube. So we're gonna get that out. There is a handle on this for trimming. So you can technically use that to trim, but I think it's possible that it's because I have a slightly old version of ShotCut. I'm not sure, but it's a little bit buggy. So I think that the best practice is, if you need to trim or anything like that, to just use the playhead and cut that way. Because again, for some reason, this may not be the case when you get it, but as you can see, the trimming is a little bit buggy for me. But that is an option if it works on your computer. The other thing that you can do with the edges of your file is at the top corner here, you can do fades. So if you want, like, let's say you have your virtual ensemble and you'd like everybody to kind of fade in instead of just abruptly start, you can do that here. Again, it's at the top left-hand corner, and if you can't see it until you go to it, and then it'll start pulsing like that, and you can grab it. And as you can see now, as this comes in, it starts black and fades in. Okay. So in order to make a virtual ensemble, we obviously want to arrange our players on a grid of some kind, or basically just make it so I can see all of them. So like I'm watching multiple videos all at once. In virtually all other video editing software, that's simply done by adjusting some type of parameter that's attached to your video clips. In ShotCut, anything that does anything to alter a video or a piece of audio is considered a filter. So you might know filters as, something like on your phone or on social media to change the look of the colors of your picture. In this case, filters, like I said, are literally anything to do with changing how your video clip looks, size-wise, crop factor, colors for sure. There's even video effects, and in addition, filters also count for any audio changes like volume. There's EQ and compression in here, stuff like that. Any of those types of things are filters in ShotCut. If I just click filters with nothing selected, let's see if I can deselect this. Let me check the chat really quick. Okay. Where would you adjust volume if it was peaking? I hope I'm not sure when you asked that question, but I hope I answered it. But in the filters, basically all of the audio functions, anything to do with sound exists there. Okay, there we go. I deselected it a little bit. There. So as you can see, if I don't have anything selected, I can't do anything in the filters. So let's say that my volume was peaking for one of these. I just select the clip that I want to change. And now you can see it says the name of the clip. And there's a plus button that's highlighted now, or available now, I should say. I can click that. And what it will present me with is favorites. And by default, it gives you some basics and some definitely every time you open this software, you'll probably use one of these things, effects, basically. If you want to access more, you can click either video or audio, and that will show you a big list of all of the video options. And same with audio. You can see everything in here. It's delays, limiters, everything. I'll also mention here on output, for those of you who are familiar with digital audio workstations and or live sound or anything like that, this is basically your mix bus or your master bus. So this is, for those of you who don't know, all of your videos, sound, and frankly, the final combination video of all of these files together. So like when you actually export this and when you're actually done with it, what you would see. That's the output, basically, this final screen. In the chat, Vicky asked, does filter apply to all parts of project or must you do each separately? So you do need to do each separately in the case that what you want is to change an individual file. So for example, we'll get into this, but if I have a bunch of videos of my ensemble playing and I want them to all be a different size, I do have to put a filter on each one individually just to then adjust each one on its own. You can copy and paste like values for those changes between each filter. But in the case that I did want to do something like, for example, now that I have all of my ensemble like together on the screen, I can see them all individually. I've adjusted them all. I put filters on each one. If I wanted to do something to the final thing, to all of it, like the last image that I see of everybody playing together that I would want people to see on YouTube or wherever, I would click output and I could put like a filter on that, like a color filter, for example, or adjust the even adjust the sound on that level too. So once I have all my files in, and let's say I do want to try mixing it, try to make it sound good, I can click on that output and I can add filters like limiters, EQs, or in the case of video, I can add color grading effects, contrast effects, all that type of stuff, basically. So obviously, in the case of virtual ensemble, like I've been saying, you're going to want to figure out a way so that you can see every single video file at the same time. It doesn't have to be a grid, but most people do a grid. Like we said, all I have to do is add a filter to adjust the parameters to make that happen. As you can see, I accidentally closed my filter section, so I have to go up here. I can just reopen that. Super easy. I'm going to add a new filter. Fortunately, the one that we need is in favorites. And then what you're looking to do is rotate and scale. You might think you want size and position, and it will also kind of work. But size and position actually has more to do with cropping. So if I want to see less of the video that I have, or if I would just want to see a certain part of it. So for example, if I had that open, or move it around, like let's say I wanted to put the video down here and have it move into the middle or something like that, I could do that. Or fit, anything like that. But we definitely don't want that here. We definitely want to be able to move. Oops. We definitely want to be able to move ours around. So here I accidentally put in a contrast filter. All I have to do is click the minus button to remove that. So let's go find rotate and scale. Now, as you can see, the amount of room you have to adjust the scale is pretty small. It will attempt to latch at certain, maybe let's say like typical types of values at times, but in general, it's like pretty imprecise. You can double click here and type in a value of some kind. Hang on. Let's say I want it 50% of the size. And I honestly would suggest doing this, particularly with virtual ensembles. And you might have to do stuff like 34.5 or 34.4 and like adjust in those really small increments with typing. And the reason I suggest doing this is because then when you do go to put a filter on another clip to try to put them all together, you're not eyeballing it. Eyeballing it is totally fine. You can totally sit here and try to drag it and get it to a point where you're happy. I think that's perfectly reasonable. But by typing it in and getting it somewhere that you like that way, then it's easier to copy over what you want for the other ones, so they're kind of even. But you could do them uneven as well. So let's say I currently only have 2 videos that I'm going to use. So I'm just going to type in some numbers until it kind of looks like someplace that I want. So let's do 50%. Because the original video filled up the entire screen perfectly, if I set it to 50%, in my head, I'm thinking, well, now if I only have 2 videos, I can have 2 videos on the screen and they'll take up the exact same amount of space if they're both at 50%, if they were the same size. And in this case, they are, and I know that. But I could have just eyeballed it and said, I kind of like 45%. I'm going to do that. The other thing that you have here is X offset and Y offset. And that's just looking at the screen like a graph. So you can adjust that however you want. Again, eyeballing it works pretty good. You have a lot more to play with here than you did in the other one. So I'm just going to eyeball it. And it'll be easier once we have a second one, and then we can adjust both. So now I want to go back to my playlist and get another video. We've made another video track already, but if we didn't, we'll want to make one. And just a reminder, all you have to do is click these 3 lines, or right-click the timeline. And you can select one to use, or one to add, I'm sorry, audio or video clip. So now that I have a second one, and I just need to move some of the stuff out of the way. That should be fine. I'm going to want to basically put the exact same filter on this other video, assuming I want them to be even. Maybe I like the way this looks. Maybe I want it to kind of be like, I don't know, like there's all sorts of little people playing along with this one big person. In that case, I could go back now and adjust the filter so that it's kind of adjusted. So I'm going to go to this clip. Actually, I'm going to go to the previous piano clip because I do want them to be even. Apologies for my buggy edition of ShotCut. Well, anyways, hopefully yours won't be quite as bad. I think mine's having some issues because uh, I my computer doesn't really like it when I'm screen sharing at the same time. So that being said, rather than doing it this way, I'll show you how to copy over a filter if I want to do that, but in the reverse direction. So again, we're going to make rotate and scale, add that in, and then if you're not having issues, which hopefully you won't, because to be honest, this is great software. It's just I think I have too old of a version. I haven't updated in months, to be honest, and they changed some things recently. If I wanted to copy over this information, I can click this copy button, or I can go in and change my copy, or sorry, copy my values over to the other ones. But if I remember right, we were at something like 46. It might have been 43 or something. Doesn't super matter right now. And then I'm just going to position that, eyeball it again. It's on. This is on the X axis, right? It's not perfect, so I can go in here, click the value, go 1025, 4, 3. Let's do like 1010. They're not totally even, but that's okay. And now, as we can see on my preview, we have both of these on the screen at the same time. So once again, these aren't going to be synced because they're, I mean, they sound good together. I think they're in similar keys, but that, to be honest, was a complete accident. That being said, if I was trying to sync these up, first of all, I would try to do it visually. So I could kind of, let's just say this one came in this way. Seeing as for whatever reason, I'm unable to click this piano one. You can obviously see the audio here. And you could start by trying to sync them up that way. Let's say I know this violin comes in a little bit early. Actually, let's say it comes in a little bit late. I don't know. Let's say the piano starts in my virtual ensemble piece and the violin comes in someplace around here. And let's also say I'd like him to fade in as he's coming in. And wherever I put this along with the audio is kind of where it'll be synced up. Now I can go back and I can check how this is going. Well, let's say I want to fade this in too, just to do it. So we can go and check how this is sounding. Space bar will start wherever the playhead is. So if I bring the playhead back to the beginning and then hit space bar, that will start playing from there. I can also use these buttons here to start playback. I wonder if I'm sharing sound. I need to make sure. There we go. It's not super critical, but just so you can hear. Now you can hear both of these, essentially. So I was getting a bunch of skipping and popping there, and that's just because my computer is a little bit old and doesn't necessarily have the power to stream video to you guys at the same time as, or slash record video at the same time as play this back perfectly. But most likely you're going to be in a situation where you're not streaming video, and so it should work a little bit better for you. But so yeah, let's say I'm happy with that. I mean, maybe I'm like, oh, that's not quite right, so I can kind of adjust this over a little bit. I can kind of adjust it back a little bit if it's a little too early, a little too late. And I basically just have to play with this. If I want really fine detail, I can kind of zoom in with this slider here. I can go find that spot kind of early on in the timeline, kind of adjust it even more detailed, like, oh, they needed to come in like literally a hair early. I can adjust that there super simply. And then I can zoom out to get a really big picture, whatever is helpful for you. The last thing I did want to mention also is if you do click these individual tracks, again, you can also put stuff. It makes less sense for virtual ensembles because in general, you're going to be using multiple clips at the same time. And so there's not really going to be a situation where you're doing cuts between others. But let's say you did do that and you, I don't know, you had one track and then you just wanted to, like you had multiple pieces, let's say, and you wanted to put them all in the same video. You might keep each player, violin 1 or 2 or whoever, right? Viola 1, whatever you're working with, soprano. You might leave that same person in this one track the whole time, and rather than putting on filters on individual clips, you could put the filter on the track itself by just clicking the track header and doing some of these exact same adjustments here. So now, obviously, we've done some of this already, but on the violin, for example, I could add a rotate and scale that up based on what's in there, or I could do some audio tweaking, like gain / volume.
Hey, Isaac.
Yeah.
Glenn here. Sorry to interrupt, but a couple of us are asking how do we adjust the sound of each video track so they're mixed together? Can you so one isn't drowning out the other?
Yep. So I'm looking here now. Yeah.
Okay.
No worries. Yeah. How do you adjust the volume of each video? Oh, still isn't sharing sound for some reason. Huh. It might just be issues. I might have to adjust some stuff in the actual software. Going off Glenn's question, I know we can use audio filters. Can we also make manual adjustments on the audio line that's visible in the track as you can in iMovie and Final Cut Pro? So that's why I'm saying, unfortunately, the main reason that I love this software and the reason that I'm using it to show some of these things is because it's free and really powerful. But it does have that one caveat, which is that everything is a filter. I mean,
even though Isaac, the line is visible in the audio portion of the track, you can see that little yellow line.
Yeah, through the middle here.
Yeah, like is that adjustable? Can you add markers in that and bend it like you can in iMovie?
I don't believe so, to be honest.
Okay.
So,
It's weird that it appears, but then you can't do anything with it.
right. My assumption is it's a keyframe.
Huh.
I could maybe try detaching the audio. We could see if that will give you a little more features, but it probably won't.
Huh.
Yeah, that's that is one of the how do you put it? One of the quirks, I guess, of this software, basically.
Well, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, it's just it's this funny feature, and part of it I think is because you can do a lot of, like, they separate it so that keyframes are probably more functional that way. But yeah, so you do basically need to do it on a track by track basis, if that's what you want, or on a video by video basis. Everything updates in real time so that you can kind of tweak things that way, but it is just one of those quirks, unfortunately. So that being said, you know, all of these things can definitely be translated to other software if it's something that you like. I mean, iMovie, unfortunately, the thing is that you can't really do a whole lot of rotating and scaling or putting multiple videos on one screen. So that's the thing there. But if you did want to go to something that's a paid software, you would more than likely have faders on your tracks individually. So that all said, let's talk about exporting. Once you're ready to export, can you show us the right side of the preview where you changed the volume before? Yeah. So that's here. So this would be where that is. My computer is not appreciating what the workload that I'm putting it through right now, but you can adjust the volume here.
That, when you adjust the volume on that one, is that you do it individually as it's part of the preview? I just wanted to make sure that my audio was adjusted before it went down to the bottom and started mixing together.
Oh, yeah. So
That's, at least that's one way to adjust audio before you start messing around with the whole thing. So if I had a level set for each particular audio inside this program in the preview, does that hold on as you pull it down to the bottom?
I'm gonna be totally honest. I don't think it does, because I think it's just for the preview. But let me like, this is your output window basically. So it may be that this is the overall volume of the whole track, but I don't believe that it holds
Okay.
the actual audio for that one. Again, that's like a filter thing. Basically, it's something that you had to put in kind of
That
in post.
I could see that the one video was starting to peak. It had yellow. So so to get that audio down, I'd have to go into the filter and mess
Correct.
with audio in there. Okay,
Correct. Yeah.
thanks.
Yep. And you could always do it on the output. If it was just like overall it was too loud, you could always turn it down by clicking the output first and then adding an audio filter there. That's an option.
Problem if I have 6 voices and they need to blend and they need to be the same volume, or I need to be able to bring the volume up as I'm putting them together. And I think that's the case with Joey too. You want each voice to be the same volume.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the reason that, again, like, the workflow is different when it comes to doing some of these functions in ShotCut. But part of the reason that the workflow is the way that it is basically it's looking at some of those adjustments as a post consideration. So if you were super concerned about getting the blend right, it could be a good idea to take and tweak that audio and get that blend ahead of time in a DAW instead of doing it in your video software. Because then you can adjust it however you like. You can make sure everything's in sync audio-wise, bring the audio into this software, and then all you're doing is syncing up the video with the audio at that point and making sure.
So then what kind of software do I need to do that? That's a whole deal, isn't it?
Yep, exactly. It is definitely a whole other deal. You can, again, a lot of that stuff I'm going to definitely talk about next week in that one and cover a lot of that stuff and sort of just the landscape of some of these things. But yeah, it is a whole other skill set and it is a whole other piece of software. There are free workstations out there. Here, I'll just pull up Safari really quick. A free one, and also it's worth bearing in mind that a lot of people also pay other people to do stuff like this for them. It's it's a whole skill set to learn it on your own, so just bear that in mind. But Reaper would be a free digital audio workstation if you wanted to work with audio that way, and it's powerful and it does everything. The most common paid ones would be Logic Pro X, or Logic Pro, which is Mac software. It's an upgrade to GarageBand. You could also use GarageBand for some basics, which is on Mac. And then another pretty famous software is Pro Tools, but it's pretty expensive. And so that's why maybe Reaper or GarageBand might be able to get what you want done basically pretty simply.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because I know that Phil Welch has done some of this for me, but he doesn't have time.
Right.
And MacPhail doesn't have, I mean, maybe you're the person to help me put this together. Again, it's like 1 or 2 songs for a class.
Yep.
And I could put in 50 hours trying to put this together.
Yep.
But in actuality, I have 6 little video clips that take less than 3 minutes for a 3-minute song. So
Yep. Yep.
know if I can do this with ShotCut or not.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, that's when we first kind of started coming in, or I should say I first started coming in, we started talking to people about virtual ensembles and things like that. I think that was one of the big maybe like realizers for people, is that it is sort of if you're trying to do it all by yourself in like a really formal way, you are sort of intersecting with multiple professions, really. You know what I mean? Like these are entire areas of work and art and process. So to a certain extent, you do kind of have to be keyed in to all of them a little bit, but what it boils down to is a lot of the stuff that you need to know in order to do a virtual ensemble, for example, is pretty minor compared to being able to literally be a video editor or literally being able to be an audio editor. It's obvious that you get that, like, you just need to adjust the volume, or you just need to do those things, and that's all you do need to do. And so again, ShotCut has a relatively awkward or unusual workflow. And it is great software, but it's worth noting basically that, like, if what you want to do is this, it does take a little bit of a learning curve, but in general, you can definitely do it. It just takes a little bit of practice. I think if I remember right, some of the people that we had originally talked to, I even suggest a lot of times trying to do something with video by yourself first so that you can get used to it, not necessarily jumping in with a full project for your first time, recording yourself singing a few parts, for example, and trying to sync those up as practice, so that you don't necessarily have to rely on other people. That you're in a controlled situation. You can kind of give it a shot that way is a really good idea. Because again, you are sort of going into all sorts of different types of spaces with this work. But again, there's the stuff that you need to be able to do a basic virtual ensemble is pretty minor. It just requires a little bit of patience at first. Also, to speak of the line, now that I'm looking at the line in the middle again, I think that actually is zero dBFS for those of you who are audio gurus here. So I think it's actually just showing you the peak volume. So for example, I can see this is not, you can't adjust this because it's not an actual volume line, but it's simply showing you how close to zero it is, how close to clipping it is, how close to distorting it is.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so really quick, I mean, it's one, but we'll spend a couple of minutes here just looking at exporting. So once I'm done, I'm obviously going to want to render this out, and I can click export up here at the top. So that's referred to export as exporting. And now it does this by default because, again, you can rearrange the menu. And this is just sort of a lovely feature of open source software due to the fact that it's usually highly customizable. You often get strange things like these because you can do whatever you want with it, basically, make it your own. I'm going to get these out of the way just so that I can see a little bit better. These are the windows. So my export window showed up kind of down there, and it will do that by default. There's a whole ton of options here, and if anybody is super into it, you can feel free to try any ones that you like. All of them are going to have different sort of ideal use cases. They even have some presets in here, and also in most other video software for web, for YouTube, for Facebook, all that kind of stuff. Something like YouTube would be good for web in general. And then they have other options down here for exporting specific parts of the video. That's what the rest of those are. But these upper ones here are just the video. And by default, it's set to this default setting. And like they say here under export help, this is going to be useful for most things. If, for example, you were trying to get something in a movie theater or on television or something like that, or something really particular, you might want to look at some of these other things. But in general, the default setting is going to be fine. And then you can do some of these other settings if you want, but they're pretty unnecessary. The only one is this dropdown where it says where you're exporting from. And again, the timeline is what's down here. That's where we've made our movie. And by default, it sets a timeline. If we wanted to do some other things, they're in there. And if you want to learn about them, you can feel free to Google it or ask me. But again, in general, you're just going to default and timeline. What it tells you to do right away is going to be usually enough. And then when you click export file, it's just going to ask you where you want to put it. And I'm not going to start this simply because my computer is already running a little slow. And in order to make sure that I'm not running any slower or ruining the recording, I'm just going to say, as soon as you hit save, you can name it whatever you want, as you normally would in any software. As soon as you hit save, it'll start a job. It will open a new window on this right-hand side, which right here is under this tab jobs. It will open this, and then you'll see your file, and it'll have a loading type bar that's like a percentage, and then it will try to estimate about how long it has left. So it might say 3 minutes and something seconds or whatever. And so if you're exporting multiple things for some reason, those will start all stacking here, and you can watch them as they finish. Once that's exported, you'll get, I'll open up my Finder. We exported an MP4 file, which again is good for most stuff. You can put it on YouTube, it'll look good. You can put it pretty much anywhere and it'll look fine. Online, at least. And from there, you can put it on a service like YouTube or Vimeo or Facebook or anything, or email it to people, whatever you need to do, basically, you have that final file there. And next week, the video that will come out of that, if you can't make it, that will cover a whole lot of this type of stuff about where the best places to put certain types of videos are, or sharing stuff with your students or anything like that. But in general, you know, this file is 48 megs. It's, well, how long is this? 2.5 minutes long, basically. that could be emailed, that could be put anywhere. But otherwise, if it's super large, you can always put it on file sharing like Dropbox. YouTube links are great, but depending on how big it is, sometimes uploads will take a long time, so that's something to bear in mind. So if you're sitting around waiting for something to upload, it can go slow. So that is the briefest of overviews of ShotCut and virtual ensemble creation. Hopefully you all got something out of that. Yeah, if anybody ever has any other questions or anything they wanted to talk about with some of this stuff or getting some advice, I'm always available for email or anything like that.
Thanks, Isaac.
Yeah,
It was really helpful.
Awesome.